welcome back to the table. Today I have a very special guest with us. You will want to stay right where you are and listen to the personal story of Brigitte Gabriel, national security analyst, New York Times best-selling author, and commentator on just about every news outlet there is. Brigitte, welcome to the table.
I thank you. I'm delighted to be with you.
Oh, we're so just honored that you could make time to come and visit with us. Our audience was introduced to you when you did the Lion's Share program with Rabbi Monty, and I wanted to really delve into more of your personal story. It's so amazing the life that you've led from growing up in war-torn Lebanon all the way to today, where you're in Washington, D.C., and just leading a magnificent program. We'll get to talk about that a little bit later. But let's start with growing up in Lebanon during the war. What was that like? How did it change your daily routine? What was happening and what was it like?
Well, before the war started, I was born and raised in Lebanon. And I was born into a devout Christian father and mother who were married for over 22 years. They couldn't have any children. And finally, God blessed my parents with a child, and it was me. So I grew up as an only child with the devoted attention and love of both my parents. And by the time I was born into their life, my father was retired and my father was 60 years old, and he had taken his money out of the government and built real estate with it and a restaurant. We had the one of the most famous restaurants in southern Lebanon.
Wow.
So I grew up in the comfort of an upper middle class family in Lebanon. Life was good. We were blessed. We had a driver to drive me to school. We had a maid that came to the house every day. And so it was a wonderful time in Lebanon. I lived growing up, visiting family every holiday. The rest of the family lived in Beirut. We used to go visit with them. And all that was good. And I remember when I was around 9 years old, I would ask my parents, my father would tell me, well, we decided to stay home this year. And I would say, why are we staying home? Because staying home meant we're no longer traveling to Beirut to be with the rest of the family.
Mhm.
And Beirut was fun. It was Paris of the Middle East because
Wow.
Lebanon, what most people don't realize was a majority Christian country. We were very open-minded. We were very tolerant. We were a diverse culture. We were open society. We welcomed people into our country. We wanted to share with them the westernization we had created in Lebanon. Muslims used to send their children to study in our universities because we had built the best universities in the Middle East. They graduated and worked in our economy because we had the best economy in the Middle East at that time, even though we did not have any oil. Beirut became Paris of the Middle East. So this is the country in which I was born into. So when my parents decided, well, we're not going to go down to Beirut for the holiday to be with the rest of the family, my uncles and my aunts and my
Yeah.
cousins, I would ask them why we're not going. And my father would say, well, we decided to stay home this year. Where I later realized that the reason why we stayed home is the Palestinians, which we had imported into the country, they have put together their heads with the Muslims in Lebanon and started fighting the Christians.
Wow.
They wanted to create a base from which to fight Israel, kill the Jews, and throw them into the sea. Something that we're not able to do in Jordan because King Hussein kicked them out. So they came to Lebanon and they used our democracy to topple our democracy. So what the Palestinians would do, they would set up a fly-by-night checkpoint and they would stop travelers driving down the street and they would ask for their IDs. And in Lebanon, our religion is written on our national ID. You are either a Christian, a Muslim, or a Jew. So when they would stop a car and they would see that this is a Christian family driving, they would get them out of the car and kill them in cold blood.
Oh my goodness.
And so, yes, it became known as identity killing at the time. As a matter of fact, Thomas Friedman, in his book From Beirut to Jerusalem, talks about it in detail.
Wow.
Identity killing, and so that's why we became prisoners to our homes and to our communities, and that was the beginning of the fall in Lebanon of the Civil War, and then later on followed by the bombing of my home in 1975 that changed my life.
Wow. So tell us about that. I know that for a time, a very long time, you and your family were in a shelter. Is that correct?
Correct. In 1975, the Palestinian and Islamists created their own army called it Jaysh Lebanon al Arabi, the Arabic Lebanese army, because, Christians are not Arabs in the Middle East. We are Arab phones. Arabs are the Muslims. So they created their own army and they started massacring the Christian. My 9/11 happened to me in 1975 when their forces trying to take over the military base above my home, fired at the military base but missed it. And 14 shells exploded in my home,
Wow.
bringing it down, burying me under the rubble, wounded. I
Wow.
ended up in a hospital for 2.5 months. And as I went from surgery to another, I would ask my father, why did they do this to us? And my father would tell me, because we are Christians, they consider us infidels and they want to kill us. So I learned since I was a 10-year-old little girl that I am wanted dead simply because I was born into the Christian faith and lived in a Christian town.
Wow.
So I had to leave the hospital and come home, but my home was no longer the home I left. I ended up living underground in an 8 by 10 bomb shelter without electricity, without water, and very little food. And that's where I lived for the next 7 years of my life, from the age of 10 till the age of 17, fighting to survive.
Wow. That is, I mean, Americans can't even think about the reality of that. We just don't even understand how to comprehend that. 7
Yeah.
years
And
underground.
7 years underground. And to get some food, we would crawl out and dig out different dandelion and different vegetation that grew around our bomb shelter because it was the only greenery we had to eat. To get some water, we would crawl to a nearby spring in a ditch because we were surrounded by Islamic snipers who would shoot at us.
Mm.
And every time before we left our bomb shelter, we would say our last goodbyes because we did not know if we're going to come back alive or dead, just to get a drink of water. And this became my existence. I remember at the age of 13 years old, I remember dressing in my Sunday best. We got a call, a friend of mine stopped by and he said, Brigitte, I just want you to know that we heard a lot of chatter on the radios and we believe our town is going to be attacked tonight. And he said, if I don't see you tomorrow, I wish you a merciful death. And he gave me a hug and he left.
Wow.
And I remember dressing in my Sunday best, in my Easter dress, in my burial clothes, because I wanted to look pretty when I am dead, knowing that when they come to slaughter me, there would be no one to bury me. And I remember begging my mother, sobbing, begging her, I don't want to die. I'm only 13 years old. Please do something. And there was nothing my mother could say or do. I remember we had a 2 hour ceasefire and we sat in the corner of our bomb shelter. And my father opened up his Bible and started reading from Psalms. I shall walk into the valley of death and fear no evil, for thou art with me. And my parents said to me, when they come to slaughter us tonight, we will create a distraction. You are a young child. We lived a long life. We'll create a distraction and we want you to run towards the Israeli border. Run to Israel as fast as you can and don't look back. We're old, you're young. Thank God, Kimberly, I did not have to make that decision that night because that's the night that Israel came in physically into Lebanon and established the security zone and set up artillery bases around our town to protect us from the Islamic and Palestinian attacks. And that's how we lived for another 5 years in the bomb shelter
Wow.
until 1982 when Israel invaded Lebanon, working with the Christians, helping the Christians take back their democracy and kick out the radical Islamic element that had taken control of the country at that time. And that's how, in 1982, as Israel invaded Lebanon, kicked out the Palestinians and Yasser Arafat with his cronies out of Beirut and into Tunisia, that's how we came out of the bomb shelter and back to rebuilding our lives.
That is a tremendous story. I mean, the impact of that on a teenager growing up, I mean, it's amazing to even think about that your whole life, you and your parents, revolved in sitting in that very tiny shelter, and as you said, having to crawl out, you know, in secret to get the minimal things that you needed to survive. I mean, again, we Americans cannot even imagine what that would be like in our hometowns for that to happen. And I know that after Israel came and set up all of that and invaded Lebanon. After, I think it was after that, you and is it you and your family moved to Israel? What was
I
that
moved
like?
to
You
Israel.
did?
I moved to Israel in 1984, and I became a news anchor for World News
Wow.
in the Middle East, working out of Jerusalem, out of Benyan Hilba in Jerusalem, the nation's building. And that's what I worked from 1984 till 1989 when I came to the United States.
So how did that so you came from Lebanon to Israel. How did that happen that you became a news anchor?
Oh, well, that's a story there. I was so determined to go to Israel that I ended up meeting some American friends who were setting up a TV station in South Lebanon. It's called Middle East Television. It's amazing how God works in mysterious ways. You never know
Yes.
what God has planned for you or how your life is going to develop. So I end up becoming friends with these missionaries that worked for this TV station. And one day they said to me, they said, look, there's this big mucky muck coming to visit from America because they're setting up this TV station in southern Lebanon. And, if you want to meet him and, apply for a job, because I always told them, oh my gosh, I would love to work with you. I would love to work with you. So they said to me, look, they're setting up like an Arabic department where maybe you can write the news or read the news. And if you want to meet him, you can come to our house, spend the night, and meet with the guy.
Wow.
Anyway, I ended up meeting him, and he said to me, "Look, we're not hiring now. We're just kind of getting everything prepared. But when we're getting ready to hire, we'll call you and let you know. Meanwhile, here's your phone, my phone number. Stay in touch." And he read the news every night on this TV station. As they were setting up the studio and hiring more people, etc. So he was the plug basically that they put in. His father is Lebanese, his mother is American, so he spoke Arabic with a very he wasn't really fluent in Arabic. So meanwhile, I got a job at the hospital in my hometown. So I would watch the news at night and I would record all the mistakes that he made. And I was able to make one phone call on a Friday because in the emergency room, there was an Israeli military telephone because we didn't have telephones in South Lebanon. So there was this Israeli military telephone. And when everybody would leave on Friday because it's Shabbat, all the Jews would go to Israel. I would walk into the emergency room and I would call him on the phone to Jerusalem and I would rattle all the mistakes that he did. And I would say, look, Tim, you were terrible. I mean, oh my goodness. Yeah, on Wednesday night, you made so many mistakes. It was embarrassing. You need to bring me to Jerusalem. You need to give me this job. I will help you with the news. You need me in Jerusalem. So, and I did this for about 5 months. And
Wow.
one day I call him one Friday and I say, Tim, guess what? Oh my goodness, you need me in Jerusalem. You're terrible. You did so many mistakes on the air. So he said to me, he said, what are you doing Sunday? And I said, what Sunday? He said, day after tomorrow, Sunday. And I said, why? Nothing. He said, you want to come to Jerusalem? And I said, are you serious this Sunday? He said, yeah, I'll send you a car. You'll come to Jerusalem. You'll check out the office. We'll work together and we'll check you out. I said, done. I hadn't even asked my parents' permission. So I go home to my mother and I'm like, Mom, guess what? I've been talking to this guy in Jerusalem, and there is this job opening and I would like to go to Jerusalem. And my mother, very conservative Christian, like, absolutely not. What do we know about these people? You're not going to go to Jerusalem. And so I got my friend, the missionary, David, who convinced my mother that it's okay for me to go to Jerusalem. And he convinced her that he is personally responsible for me. And if anything happens to me, he is the one to blame. So because my mother trusted him and his wife, Shoshana, she agreed to let me go to Jerusalem. I went to Jerusalem on Sunday and I signed the contract on Thursday. And Friday, I became news anchor for World. Friday, I started working as production assistant. I came back to Lebanon, resigned from my job, went to Jerusalem, and 6 months later, in May of 1985, I became news anchor for World News in the Middle East. So,
My
the lesson of the story, what God has for you, no one can take away from you. Trust in God because your future is in His hand. And whatever your dreams are, they are very small for Him. He can make any big dream happen. And He made my dreams become a reality. And that's how I ended up working in Jerusalem as first as a production assistant, 6 months into the job, the news anchor quit.
Oh,
And my bureau chief called me into the office, and it was 6 o'clock in the evening. He said, "Tomorrow evening at 6 p.m., you will be the news anchor for World News Tonight. You'll be on the air."
oh
And
my
that's how it
goodness. That is just a thrilling story, actually.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
amazing. And you were
It's
just
really interesting. My life story. And, usually I don't talk about these things. Usually I give media interviews about, what do you think is going to happen in Iran or, the Israeli Palestinian conflict. I rarely get to engage in this type of dialogue
yes.
with any interviewee. But my story is detailed in my book titled Because They Hate. It's a New York Times bestseller that came out in 2006. It's available on Amazon. I urge you to read it. Go to Amazon Because They Hate. Or you can go to our website, Act for America, make a donation, and you'll get the book as well. But it's titled Because They Hate. And it's an amazing story of how I grew up from a bomb shelter and ended up becoming a news anchor for World News in the Middle East and later came to America.
Yes. I mean, you've had such a career and look how it started. Like you said, you never know how God is going to put you in the right place at the right time and have the right circumstances for you to then flourish after coming through such an ordeal in the bomb shelter and living under that oppression from the Palestinians in Lebanon. It's truly amazing. And you've had a great career since that first anchor job, becoming a journalist and a commentator on national security and world events, geopolitical situations. I mean, your rise in that arena is just truly phenomenal, truly phenomenal. And
Thank you.
I know I wanted to ask you specifically about this. Um, at one time, when Margaret Thatcher was the British Prime Minister. She came to Israel for a visit, and you actually got to meet her at a private reception. What was that like?
That was amazing. Part of my work as a news anchor exposed me to meeting some incredible world leaders and world figures, prominent world figures that visited Jerusalem. And I think one of my highlights was meeting Margaret Thatcher. She was an amazing woman. She was very feminine and very strong. A lot of people look at the Iron Lady and they think, "Oh my gosh, she is so you don't imagine her to be as feminine as she was." I think for me, she was the example that you can be a woman, you can be feminine, and you can prove that you have a brain. You don't
Mm.
even need to prove it. It just oozes out of you that you are strong, you are assertive, yet you are kind, you are respectful to everybody. This is one thing I noticed about her, which was remarkable. She was such, I admired her from afar before I ever met her. But she was an amazing lady, and she is such an inspiration and continue to be such an inspiration. And look at all the things she talked about while everybody was against her. I mean, talk about a feminist who went up through the ranks of a male dominated world,
Yes.
if in politics, not just in business. And she was able to make such a financial impact, such a political impact on her country, and such a political legacy worldwide that you and I are talking about right now.
Yeah.
She was an amazing human being, and I aspire one day that I will be remembered. If anybody ever talks about me after I'm gone, that they will remember me as fondly as I remember Margaret Thatcher.
Yes. Well, I don't think there'll be any doubt about that at all. Everybody who knows you, Brigitte, loves you because you are that strong but feminine, very intelligent woman who has had an amazing career. And I also admired her. I've admired her for years. I have her books, the whole thing. I've just admired that. And I remember there's a scene in the movie Iron Lady. What you reminded me of it when you were talking about her feminine side. There's a scene in the movie where there's a big decision that has to be made, and all of her cabinet people are, fussing over it and how, oh, she can't possibly make this decision. What are we going to do? She calls them over to her house and she makes them all dinner.
Yeah,
And it's
yeah.
this traditional English dinner, meat and potatoes kind of thing, and 2 of the cabinet members comment and say, "And she can cook too."
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it's like,
yeah.
yes,
Ex-
she was that, just wonderful, phenomenal leader, and, I'm so glad I got to ask you about that because I've always admired her. So after Israel, what sparked your move to America?
I met an American war correspondent who worked with me, and that's how I got married
Ah.
in Jerusalem. I got married at Christ Church in Jerusalem, and I ended up moving with him to the United States after my parents passed away. And that's how I became an American. That's how I ended up coming to the United States.
Well, I am so glad that you did.
Thank
Now,
you.
since, coming to America, you've had, some New York Times best-selling books. I think you've written 3. One my favorite is Rise, which is I really got to know well a few years ago. What inspired you to write each of those books, and why do you think they became New York Times bestsellers?
The first book I wrote was Because They Hate. And I actually started writing it because um, my husband said to me, he said, for your children, you need to write your story
Mm,
because in case something happens to you, your children should know your story, your life, what you went through.
yes.
And that's how I started writing the book. I actually started writing the book in 1994, and it was very emotional for me. It was very traumatic. I was going through PTSD, reliving my story, the bad memories, and it was written not because of politics or anything at all. It was just to share with my children about my life, my upbringing, etc. And ended up putting it aside. And then when September 11th happened, I was able to take the book. No, actually, I'll be a little bit more honest. I wanted to tell my story to my children, but the book title was In the Name of God: What People Do to Other People in the Name of God. And it was actually directed at Christians who wronged me so badly. I was sexually harassed on the job, attempted rape at a Christian ministry,
Mm.
where the head of the ministry tried to bribe me with $65,000 to keep my mouth shut because they were raising $80 million a year in the United States, telling people they're saving souls in the Middle East. All lies, prostitute
Wow.
brought to the office, paid for by American born again Christian donors.
Mm.
So I wanted to write my book not just to share with my children my life story, what I went through, but also to expose the evil and corruption that happens when people acquire power and money and influence at the same time, whether they get it through ministry, whether they get it through fame, politics, etc. Because I wanted my children to understand that you only trust in God and nobody else, because
That's
people
right.
are people.
Yes.
And so the name of the book was In the Name of God. In God's name. That was the book. And so after September 11th happened, I changed. I took only my life story out of the book, and I didn't discuss anything else. And I turned it into why we need to wake up in America to save Western civilization, because we are faced with an enemy bent on killing us
Mhm.
in the name of their Allah, in the name of their God, because they consider us infidels, and what we can do to save our country. And in my book, Because They Hate, I discuss the infiltration of our universities, the money funding our universities to set up Middle East study department, a political science department, and appointing Arab professors who are anti-Israel and anti-America to teach that Israel is evil. America is a colonizer and the Islamic world is the oppressed. And I go through how what's happening in our country in education, why the Middle East hates Israel, etc. If you read my book today, you would think I wrote it yesterday. And so that's how I ended up writing my first book, Because They Hate. My second book, titled They Must Be Stopped, dived more into the Islamic ideology that came out in 2008. It talked about the Muslim Brotherhood infiltration of the United States, their plan for the United States, their 100-year plan for radical Islam to infiltrate and dominate the West and establish an Islamic government on earth. In the counterterrorism circles, this plan became known as the Project. So that was my book, They Must Be Stopped. And the subtitle was what They Must Be Stopped. And how we can defeat radical Islam and and how we can do it. And my third book was Rise,
Yes.
because I realized that people are asleep. People think if we pray for our country, things are going to change. And I am a firm believer that God uses his people as his instruments of change. And I wrote my book, Cries, because I wanted to not only educate people, but inspire people to rise up and take action and be more engaged in what happens in our community, and how we can impact policy.
Yes, exactly. Rise is an amazing book. Amazing. I think I read it twice in the space of a couple of years or something like that. It really does point out how this radical Islamic movement has infiltrated in places where you wouldn't even think, and how Americans, as you said, have to rise and wake up and start realizing what is happening. And just as you said, that book could have come out yesterday and been true, 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 100%. It was a very inspiring book, and I'm so thankful that you wrote it and your other books as well, because it really, for people who read them, it woke us up. It said, "Oh, hey, wait a minute, what's going on here?" And it's still happening, unfortunately, as you talk about when you are commentating on news programs. And so I'm just so thankful that we have a voice, a strong voice such as yours, to keep that out in the public eye, keep it right up front in the front page, so to speak, so that we don't forget, because it's a quiet infiltration many times. And I know you've spoken about that a lot. And that brings me in just a few minutes that we have left. I wanted to ask you about Act for America, which I subscribe to the newsletter. It's great help to me in my work, actually, because it keeps me up on what's happening, what's going on. So tell us about your grassroots movement, Act for America.
Well, I started Act for America because I not only wanted to educate people about the problem, I wanted to empower them with the tools where they can take action about the problem. What made me start Act for America? After September 11th, September 11th was a defining moment for the United States. We all did the same thing. If we were anywhere near a television screen, we couldn't get enough news. We all were sad. We were frustrated. We were devastated. My daughters came home from school that day, and my daughter sat next to me and she said, "Mommy, why did they do this to us?" And I found myself, Kimberly, repeating to my daughter the same words my father said to me when I was her age, wounded in a hospital bed. They hate us because they consider us infidels. And so I found myself looking into my daughter's eyes and repeating the same words to her. Here we were, two generations apart. I was a young Lebanese girl. She's a young American girl. I spoke Arabic. She speaks English. 8,000 miles apart, 30 years apart, two continents apart. And I had to repeat to her the same words my daddy said to me. That day was my defining moment. That day I vowed that I will do everything I can to make sure that my daughter will never have to look into her child's eyes and repeat to him or to her what my daddy said to me and what I had to say to her. That day I was reborn as an activist. And I laid in my bed, in my couch, in my family room, from Tuesday morning, September 11th, until Sunday, praying, God, what can I do to make a difference? You see, Kimberly, I'm a firm believer that every single one of us has a destiny to fulfill. Every single one of us has a purpose. And no matter what trials and tribulations we go through in life, no matter what challenges we go through in life, they are nothing more than stepping stone, than a refining process. So God can use us to fulfill our purpose. We are just being refined to serve Him better. And I realized I'm going to start an organization called Act for America to educate people and empower people and mobilize people to impact policy. And I named the organization Act for America. Not think about America, not hope for America, not pray for America, but act for America. Because we can hope and pray and wish for our country, and we all do. I pray for our country morning and night. But without action, nothing happens. God doesn't change the world through lightning in the sky. God uses His people as His instruments of change. So I hope for the Christians who are watching us right now, if you are as concerned about what's happening in our country as I am, join us. Go to actforamerica.org right now. We are a grassroots movement focused on protecting and preserving America, safeguarding our freedoms, protecting our Judeo-Christian values, and preserving America in the way in which our founding fathers found it and envisioned it to be. We are the firewall. We are the protectors of our country. We are the protectors of the shining city on a hill, which is America. So I hope this will be your defining moment. You can start a chapter in your community. Click on join us. Start a chapter in your community. We have chapters nationwide. We have activists nationwide. We help pass 300 bills at the federal level and the state level to protect and preserve America. If you don't have time to start a chapter, if you don't have time to volunteer, sign up to receive our emails and action alerts. They're free, they don't cost you anything. Stand with us as a member, as a patriot partner. Support us financially so together we can make a difference for the country. This is what we do with Act for America, and I hope and pray that my messages resonate with you today. Because if you watch this program without taking tangible action where you can be an effective citizen, an effective Christian, you might as well be watching Dancing with the Stars. Education is important, but education without action is insufficient. Education must be coupled with action. Go to actforamerica.org right now and join us.
Well, that was a rousing speech to get us, ready to act. I want to say, yes, let's go.
Amen.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, and I do hope that anyone watching this program will at least subscribe to the action alerts. As Brigitte said, it's a free to you. I get them they come a couple of times a week, and it really keeps you, abreast of what is happening. And a lot of times it's commentary or information or both that we're not hearing even in certainly not mainstream media, but even in the alternative media that many of us watch, you sometimes won't hear this information there either. And there are on the website very practical, very easy, not time-consuming tips on how you can act in your community and be a person who is really supporting America, our Judeo-Christian values, all the things that Brigitte talked about. I urge you to do it. And we'll put the website on the screen for our viewers. Brigitte, thank you so much for being with me today. I've enjoyed our conversation so much.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for having me with you, and I look forward for next time.
Yes, absolutely. And friends, thank you for being here as well. And remember, the King is coming. Keep your oil lamps full. And we'll see you next time right here at the table.
The views shared in this program are those of the speakers and may not necessarily reflect the beliefs of Lion and Lamb Ministries. We're honored to walk with you in the pursuit of Scripture and faith in Yeshua the Messiah. Thank you for viewing our program.